We are getting fancy on him. It is the Fantasy Focus Football Award Show to put a capper on the 2019 NFL season, or at least the fantasy football season. Field, Matthew, Stephania hanging out with you. It's Monday night. We rarely do a show at night.
It's an award show.
It's
award shows are in the evening. You get all glammed up.
Right, Matthew wore a jersey, which is his definition of getting glammed up.
This is my definition of glammed up.
Yeah, so, and also still putting his IFB on. Some things, don't change.
Some things never change.
Something new and different. We're doing 10 awards. We'll hand them out. Many of them are pretty self-explanatory. Heck, you can probably guess the winners, but there will be some suspense. We promise you that. The NFL regular season is over. Daniel, do you want to open this gift up now, or do you want to give Matthew the reins first? So we can talk about a new development in his life.
I think we open it up, give Matthew the reins first. Well, maybe we'll do yours out of the mid-roll.
Okay.
So I don't know if people are aware of this, but when I first came to ESPN, back in 2007, the management here at ESPN said to me very kindly, perhaps stupidly, but they said, "Hey Matthew, we want to put more of an emphasis on our fantasy department, on our fantasy content, on our games, and everything that we're doing in fantasy. We think this is an exploding area, and we would love your input. We would love significant input from you in terms of who else we hire, where do we go, everything like that."
It's a debatable decision in that time.
100%. 100%.
I'm just going to.
But if history looks upon it fondly, if history looks upon that time in my life fondly, it will be because of a couple of decisions I made. And one of them was that I said we should hire Stephania Bell. Stephania Bell is a young woman that I have met. She is a fantastic fantasy player. She does all these injury things. She's doing these for a couple of different sites. I think at the time she was doing them for Waiver-wire, our friends over at Waiver-wire. And I thought she is terrific. She is well spoken. I think she will be great on television. She'll be great on radio. She's a great writer. She knows a lot. I think she will make us better. And I was able to convince the powers that be.
Wow.
That happened, right? And so I think as a result of that, the company has asked me, Stephania, to present this with you, a plaque recognizing your 10 magical years at the Walt Disney Company.
We are not worthy. We are not worthy.
I'm so excited.
Wow.
Look at that. 10 magical years.
Yeah.
Look at that.
Stefan, you survived 10 years with Matthew.
Yeah. Well, that's what she got the plaque for. Just surviving 10 years with me.
It's actually been a little longer. There was a warm-up period.
Don't they normally give you a pin for 10 years, but they gave you a plaque?
No, you got the plaque.
Emphasize
I do. Look at I have.
Oh, there's a little pin up in the corner, too. Yeah, for when you win the day-to-day.
Every day to remind me that, I have been blessed of a decade.
Yeah.
I never knew your middle name was Lee, either.
Oh, yes. Well, we're sharing with the world now. Yes.
Well, it's on the plaque. Sorry.
Here is my middle name.
Lee Bell.
That's
a beautiful
true.
name.
Thank you. Wow.
Congratulations.
But there's no question that Stephania's stellar work over the last decade on all of ESPN's many platforms
I'd like to thank the Academy.
has reflected certainly well on me and everyone else that took a chance on you. So congratulations.
I didn't
you know
write
how to
a
hire him,
speech.
that's for sure.
I was going to say, I'd like to thank the Academy.
Sure.
I'd like to thank everyone who was here. I couldn't do it without all of you. Thank you.
To be honest, you could have done it without Daniel. Let's be fair.
No, come on, be nice.
She's your favorite gal. She's Stephania Bell.
A tear.
Yeah. So anyway, congratulations, Stephania. Here's to another 10.
Yes.
Here's to another 10.
Indeed, on that. So Matthew, I'm going to give you 90 seconds on the clock. You want to talk about Bruce Allen? Can you do it?
Yeah, well, just, you know what I mean? So as we celebrate a great 10 years here with Stephania Bell, we close the chapter on an awful 10 years as the Washington Redskins organization gave me the best birthday present I could have. It was my birthday yesterday.
Happy belated birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. They gave me an amazing present, which is #Fire Bruce Allen. It worked. Bruce Allen no longer a part of the Washington Redskins organization. They announced earlier today. And as I said on social media, look, this is not about celebrating somebody getting fired. You never want somebody to get fired. But the NFL, as much as any industry in the world, is a results-oriented industry. And the results just haven't been there for Bruce Allen, who has been in charge of all football operations for the Redskins for over a decade. And over that decade, they have one of the worst win-loss records in the NFL. They have become honestly a laughingstock of not only the NFL, but of professional sports. They are 29th in win percentage during Bruce Allen's era. And so Mr. Snyder and the Redskins organization did candidly what should have been done a long time ago, but they listened to the fans. They looked internally and they said, you know what, we need to make a change. So I am very excited. I announced on, I wrote a column earlier this year, a love-hate column earlier this year on ESPN.com where I said, I'm out. I'm done. I'm sick of being a Redskins fan. Until they get rid of Bruce Allen, I'm done. I can't root for this organization anymore. Bruce Allen is gone, and so I am back. I'm officially back as a Redskins fan. If you are not watching this live, I am wearing my Terry McLaurin jersey, number 17.
Scoring McLaurin. Listen, who is my pick for Fantasy Rookie of the Year. Wow,
unbelievable. Unbelievable what he accomplished this year. And so just representing, I'm back in. I'm cautiously optimistic that that the Redskins will hire somebody terrific that can lead the franchise in the right direction. Listen, nowhere to go but up. But I'm back in. Hail the Redskins. Hail victory. I'm very excited. Hashtag fire Bruce Allen actually worked. Did you know this? Last thing I'll say here, Field, and then we'll move on. But our former colleague, Darren Hayes, who's now down in Washington, D.C., he's a sports director down there. And so he posted this on Twitter. The hashtag fire Bruce Allen was used over 55,000 times in the past calendar year. 31% of those uses came in the last month. So I'm not saying it's the only reason, but I will say that I do think it became a movement that a lot of people got behind. And so anyway,
why we never get on your bad side?
Yeah.
You know what? Here's how you not get on my bad side. Don't become in charge of my franchise for a decade and lead us to the dumpster.
I'm in the clear then.
Do you understand? Like when he took over, there was a waiting list of season tickets, like years upon years long. And now literally you can get into a game for $5. I mean, like it's not only
maybe
about,
even cheaper if you use our SeatGeek promo code FFF.
There you go.
There you
Way to go,
go.
Secret Squirrel. Nice job.
Let's get to the
I mean,
awards.
honestly, like, you know, he ran Kirk Cousins out of the building. Trent Williams didn't play this year because it's just anyway. These are good times in Washington, D.C. We celebrate the future of the Redskins. We celebrate the future of Stephania Bell at ESPN, who will be here for many, many more years. And we celebrate you, Field Yates.
I'm not sure
just
why.
because you're you.
Rewind.
Fantasy
News from the National Football League.
This is the instant replay.
Let's get things rolling here. We begin with our 1 week wonder. You know what it is. It's the best performance that seemingly came out of nowhere, and being a one-hit wonder is not the same thing as being a 1 week wonder for those that are following for Daniel's musical preferences. Our nominees this year: Demarcus Robinson of the Chiefs, who in week 2 had 35.2 fantasy points. Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals, who had 35 fantasy points, and the Cardinals told us to start him in fantasy football. It just happened like an hour after the game. Which exactly. Nobody.
Thank you very much.
John Ross in week 1 did what John Ross sometimes does, which is out of nowhere games. 34.8 fantasy points with 2 touchdowns included. And finally, Danny Dimes in his inaugural start as the New York Giants quarterback at 34.2 fantasy points. Matthew, you went against the grain here because you picked John Ross. You were the only person to vote in such category that way. Quick reason why.
Quick reason why is, first off, just process of elimination. Demarcus Robinson had a monster game in week 2 against Oakland, but everyone did. Like, I mean, you know, Mahomes had a monster game. Like, Mecole Hardman had a big game there. So you could have argued him as well. Chase Edmonds had some success recently. It was just because of David Johnson and just, you know, listen, my whole anti-Twitter rant, I just couldn't vote for Chase Edmonds. You think about Daniel Jones, who came in, like, you couldn't have possibly known that at all, obviously, because he came in as a backup. Like, he didn't start that game against Tampa Bay. I don't believe.
Yeah, it did.
No,
it was
I thought
his first start. It was
that his first start? I thought
yes,
that was
his. It was Saquon who got hurt in the game. It was Daniel Jones' first start. Let him back from the comeback. But anyways, no one was talking about Daniel Jones having a crazy bananas game. But the person,
no, they didn't. And by the way, also everyone was good against Tampa Bay. But for me, it was John Ross who, when you think about coming out of nowhere, here's a guy that had been sort of left for dead, a former first-round pick, had dealt with injuries, just hadn't really done much. He's on Cincinnati. We just don't know how good this offense is going to be under Zach Taylor. No A.J. Green. And then all of a sudden, John Ross comes out 7 for 158, 2 touchdowns, looks electric on the road at Seattle, where we thought at the time would be a tough place to play. So that was why that's why I voted for John Ross, but I was the only one.
Without further ado, I picked up I went to Demarcus Robinson just because I know Tyreek Hill was hurt, but everybody was Mecole Hardman and more Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce. Without further ado,
the 06010E, right? That's the name of the award.
06010E for the 1 week wonder goes to Stephania Bell. Tell us more.
Chase Edmonds.
Who you voted for.
Yes. Well, we heard that. Matthew kind of gave it away because Chase Edmonds was the one that the Arizona Cardinals told us to start, as you said, Field, a little bit too late. But if you were paying attention, 35 fantasy points in that Week 7 game. And let me tell you about his career prior to that. He had just 2 games with 15 or more fantasy points. He only had 3 carries of his total 84 carries where he gained 20 or more yards. And in that game, all 3 touchdown runs were at least 20 yards.
Yeah.
Okay? So in one game, he outdid what he did only 3 times in 84 carries before. In the first 6 games this season, no games with more than 8 carries. He basically was a non-factor because, hey, there was this guy, David Johnson, that we were all looking at. So,
more to come on David Johnson throughout the show. That much I can promise you. Let's move things along to our next award. This is a big one here. The Game of the Year. And again, self-explanatory here. In our opinion, the best single game performance of 2019, the nominees, and these are in order of how many points these players scored. Will Fuller in Week 5, 53.7 fantasy points, the most by any player in a game this season. Aaron Jones in Week 5 as well, 49.2 fantasy points. Christian McCaffrey, also in Week 5, 47.7 fantasy points. And then Sammy Watkins all the way back in Week 1, 46.8 fantasy points. Matthew, you and I actually did not pick the winner, but you and I were the only 2 people to vote for Aaron Jones. My reason is this. Of these games, that was a guy that you were actually starting. Like Will Fuller, there was still some hesitation starting him because of how, as we know, how brittle he is. And then Sammy Watkins
I will say,
1.
Will Fuller was on the love list that week, though.
Wow.
Yeah, on that particular week. He was on the love list because it was just like he'd been getting all these targets and he hadn't been happening. It was just like he was due, like regression to the mean. And he kept being high in like Mike Clay's OTD and that, and so Will Fuller, believe it or not, was actually on the love list. You can go back and look this up on Week 5. So he was a recommended start that week. I, however, still voted for Aaron Jones, and I did it for 2 reasons. First off, free Aaron Jones, right? Hashtag free Aaron Jones. I got to vote for Aaron Jones. I also thought it was one thing to have a big game against Atlanta, which is what Will Fuller did as a wide receiver. It's another thing to do it on the road at Dallas.
Yeah, 4 touchdowns in that game.
4 touchdowns. He was the first player since LaDainian Tomlinson in 2006 to have 4 rushing touchdowns and 7 catches in the same game. They were the Cowboys were the 3rd best red zone defense through the first 4 weeks of the season. This happened in Week 5, and so on the road in an important NFC game, I thought, and just also, by the way, it's more significant for a running back to do it than when a wide receiver.
Agreed.
So
that being said.
So anyway, that's why I voted for Aaron Jones.
Drum roll, please. The 06-0-0 for the Game of the Year goes to
Will Fuller. And let me tell you, I was a beneficiary. Field, I do believe you remember that game.
Wow, Stephania, we could have not brought this up.
Yeah, Field was well aware of the game. And look, I picked him. I had a little personal attachment because Will Fuller was on my team in the War Room League. And I also am well aware that far exceeded what he did the remainder of the year. He averaged just 8 points per game in his other 10 games this season, so it shows you the difference. Part of the reason he was only starting 11% of leagues is because people weren't sure whether they could trust his health, and they hadn't seen him, as Matthew pointed out, doing it on the field. So look, previous career high fantasy point total, because he was a guy who could be explosive. He's had big games, but it was 29.5 fantasy points. He scored 53.7 fantasy points in this game. I mean, to me, single game performance, you said because Aaron Jones was, you said that as factored in as him being consistently able to produce. To me, what part of the reason Will Fuller was such a top 1 game performance was because it was so out of the range of anything else he'd ever done.
Stephania is throwing a perfect game so far. Daniel, what do you got?
I got to say, the reason why I voted for Will Fuller as well, and it's simply because it started with a 5.
I did.
It's the idea of any fantasy player scoring a number that starts with a 5 in fantasy is just
significant,
outrageous. So not that any of these 40-point performances weren't fantastic, and also, can we just say like how phenomenal Week 5 was for fantasy?
Dude, first time ever. There were 4 players with at least 40, 5 players at least 40 fantasy points. First time it had ever happened. Next one here is the comeback player of the year, the most productive player this season that was either injured or disappointing in 2018. Our nominees are Dalvin Cook for the Vikings, Devontae Parker for the Miami Dolphins, Ryan Tannehill from the Tennessee Titans, and our guy Leonard Fournette from the Jaguars, who actually didn't even play in Week 17. Still a very productive season for him. It was unanimous for all 3 of us, the winner, but in second place was Devontae Parker, which I'm confused by only because all he came back from was disappointment. He didn't come back from injury. He just was bad before. I mean, coming back from being bad. that a real thing?
And by the way, coming back from being bad for 4 straight years.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, like, Devontae Parker had been a preseason sleeper and hyped up for 4 straight years. He was a first-round draft pick of the Miami Dolphins 5 years ago. And, you know, he's been a massive disappointment. And so it's sort of shocking that in a year in which there was Josh Rosen or Ryan Fitzpatrick under center for a clearly rebuilding Dolphins offense, that he would put up the kind of numbers he did. Look, I actually, if it was tough for me to vote between Dalvin Cook or Ryan Tannehill, because Tannehill was a backup, was sort of left for dead from Miami, didn't draw a lot of interest on the free agent market, signed I believe a 1-year deal to go be a backup in Tennessee.
He was traded, but same thing.
Oh, was it traded? Right, sorry. But he wasn't traded for very much, right?
He's a 4th-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, so, and he went there, and then, you know, what he did once taking over for Marcus Mariota in, I believe, week 7, unbelievable.
He was remarkable.
I mean, he's going to be a very rich man this offseason. Fournette and Dalvin Cook have both been hurt. I personally voted for Dalvin Cook, guys, just because I'm just telling you why I voted for him.
Oh, no,
you want to
roll.
You want 2-1?
Let's get drum roll, please. The 06-0-0 goes to, and Stephania, you're pitching a perfect game here, so just keep it going.
Dalvin Cook, running back for the Minnesota Vikings, if you're not aware. Comeback player of the year. Well, we all know that I love these guys because I'm spend so much time talking about their injuries that when a guy has a big injury that knocks him out. And I think particularly for me, part of the comeback player of the year has to do with expectations. Ryan Tannehill blew everybody out of the water, but the expectations on a running back with all eyes upon him to carry the franchise after the year he had coming off the ACL, which I never expected to be an amazing year. It usually takes the guys an extra year under their belt before they do the kinds of things Dalvin Cook could do. And I had a feeling he looked really good in the preseason, 1 year removed from the injury, and he stood up to the pressure and delivered.
Yeah, he sure did. I actually thought that it was pretty clearly Dalvin Cook here with Leonard Fournette as my next choice.
No
'cause
way.
He actually was disappointing.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm full
What
on
is
Team
Tannehill coming back
Devontae
from?
Parker here. Like,
What is Devontae Parker coming back from?
Coming back from what, though?
from being terrible for the
Breakout.
first 3 years of his career.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay,
because
first
you
4
want to talk
years.
about Ryan Tannehill being left for dead. Like, is there a wide receiver that was more left for dead this season than Devontae Parker, who year after year after year had
Odell
spurned
said the
fantasy
Giants
players?
send him to Cleveland to die.
I understand
So, I guess
that.
Technically,
I mean, we just talked about John Ross. We talked about, I mean, like,
Yeah.
like I mean,
my
listen,
thing is,
But I don't think he was
Dalvin
coming
Cook-
back
so-
from a big,
I think about it like this. Dalvin Cook came back from being injured, which I understand, but the expectation, like you had said, is that he would be a top 15 running back. Nobody expected this from Devontae Parker, which is why I feel like
Right, there are other categories.
But that,
Yeah,
but
that.
see, yeah, I'm
exactly.
saying
He'll
for
fit into those
comeback,
buckets later.
like to be a comeback player, you have to have been there to start.
Correct. He was never there in the
You
Yeah,
are coming back.
Yeah, he showed up for the first time. He didn't come back. He actually showed up for the first time.
Maybe we'll have.
Right,
Maybe
but-
we'll find him somewhere.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. Devontae Parker
Yeah.
may make the show.
But I also feel like, here's the other thing. I just think as great as Devontae Parker was, and he was very, very good, Dalvin Cook was a top 3 running back.
Number 2 in points per game.
Like,
Yeah.
right, exactly.
Number
And to
2.
get a number 2 running back is more valuable, I think, than Devontae Parker.
No question
and this
about
is,
that.
But that's the decision.
Like,
okay, so you get the number 2 running back in the second round, or you get Devontae Parker off the waiver wire.
So
There's
maybe
a different
there's a category for
category for
Devontae
that.
Parker that
We'll
might
find
fit
out.
in, but
We're
let's
not
go
talking
along
about
here.
comeback player. Here's what I would say. Here's the other thing I would say.
Sure.
And understand, I think value is important, especially in a lot of these categories. I think it's less so here in terms of comeback player of the year. To me, it's sort of about where they finished. If we were to draft today, right now, for next year, who goes first, Dalvin Cook or Devontae Parker?
Is it a points per? Is it an AFC East league?
It doesn't matter what the category is.
Dalvin
Sure.
Cook, it's not close.
It's Dalvin
Cook.
Cook, and it's not close.
All right, moving along here.
That's my
Biggest
point.
disappointment,
You're
the
right.
player who was the biggest letdown this season. So sort of the anti of what we've been talking about for much of the show, based on both draft position and production. Here are 5 nominees, but we are honed in on just a couple of them.
I
David
was
Johnson-
shocked, by the way, that I was not nominated in this category. I thought I was a shoo-in.
I wrote you
Unfortunately,
in.
you have to be.
I know you wrote me in.
But you have to
Thank you.
play in the NFL.
You delivered the exact performance that we expected you to deliver.
that's what
this
it's not a big
Yeah, that's
disappointment.
why. It
David
was exactly
Johnson
what we
was
want.
drafted as RB5. He finished as RB29. Odell Beckham Jr. was drafted as wide receiver 6. He finished as wide receiver 33 on a per-game basis. Better in terms of overall scoring. Saquon Barkley, Brandon Cooks, who finished as wide receiver 66 on a per-game basis. And then Baker Mayfield, a top 5 quarterback in the preseason, who finished as quarterback 27. Matthew, you actually went against the grain here. You have an Odell thing, and you just felt like he was the most disappointing player. He was not the winner, though.
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. I mean, because here's the thing. Like, Saquon sort of surprised me. Was Saquon what you wanted him to be? No, but like Saquon finished as a top 7 fantasy running back
on a per game basis, and he was awesome in the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so it's weird. Like to me, if you're going to put Saquon on this list, you ought to put Alvin Kamara on this list because the argument for those two guys, is opportunity cost because you didn't draft Christian McCaffrey. If you got Barkley or you got Alvin Kamara, you didn't get McCaffrey. And so it was the opportunity cost.
That's baked in, I think, to if you were to have voted for Saquon, it's the idea that you saw CMC every single week and you could have had that and you passed on that.
There's certainly some disappointment there, but there were ways, I think, But
I mean, go ahead. I mean,
no, I am with Matthew here that like Saquon, if we were doing this in week 8, he may have been the runaway winner.
Yeah, he finished stronger.
The way he finished,
but I will tell you why I voted for Odell.
Yeah, why OBJ?
So Brandon Cooks missed time, obviously, with the concussions, right? Saquon Barkley, he got hurt as well. David Johnson got hurt as well. Odell Beckham Jr. is the only guy on this list that played every single game. And yet still, and he cost the most. I mean, in terms of ADP. So Brandon
not
Cooks,
more than David Johnson.
Well, no, that is correct. But David Johnson also was. It was close for me between David Johnson and Odell Beckham Jr. But I sort of gave David Johnson the benefit of the doubt because of a screwed up Cardinals franchise and because he also got hurt.
Right.
Odell Beckham Jr. was. To me, he was the biggest disappointment because you had to if you drafted him this year, you drafted him at the end of the first round or top of the second. Like he cost you a high draft pick, and you had to play him every week because you're like, I can't bench Beckham. But then he killed you every single week because he just never produced, and you were like, well, the schedule gets easier. Well, this has got to be the week. And look, he's getting the targets. Like he was drafted 13th overall.
Yeah,
I mean, I just feel like that. Just like listen, and I'll cop to this. I feel like Odell Beckham Jr. was my worst call of the year because I was all in on him.
We're not doing bad calls.
I know, but I'm just owning it.
Just relax.
I'm just owning it.
You want to own it for the entire fantasy community because the entire fantasy community said that Odell Beckham Jr. was going to be a top 5.
100%. I was not alone on that island. I was not alone on that island.
It's the celebration show.
All right,
stop, Stephania.
Beckham was my vote. The biggest disappointment. It was brutal, and he represents to me the entire Browns organization, which I think was the biggest disappointment this year.
I don't normally want to correct you, Matthew, but you said he was the only player on that list to play all 16 games. The reason why I know that Baker Mayfield played all 16 games because the Browns actually had the gall and the gumption to tell us that Baker Mayfield would be their first quarterback to start 16 games in a season in 18 years.
Oh, you're right.
But the Browns,
I didn't see Baker even on the list as a big fantasy disappointment.
Stephania keeps up the red hot streak. The winner is the 06-0-OE4. The most disappointing player of the season goes to
the aforementioned David Johnson. Look, I drafted David Johnson also in the War Room League.
You're to blame.
It is my fault. Yes. Well, we had such
the curse of Stephania Bell, Daniel Dopp.
Yeah, but really, I mean, he had a little tiny ankle problem partway through. But here, I think to me, part of the disappointment with David Johnson was this precipitous fall off a cliff that no one saw coming after he had the ankle issue. Now, he didn't start out, amazing or maybe carry your team as much as you wanted to, but he scored in each of his first 3 games this season and only one of his games since that time. And listen to this, weeks 7 through 17, only one finish inside the top 50.
About that.
You heard me, the top 50. Sometimes he wasn't even on the field. We didn't even understand why. Healthy scratch, confusion there at Arizona. There was really, it was never clearly stated. Once Kenyon Drake came in, the signs were there that he was done. But it was never really overtly stated because if you remember, at one point, Cliff Kingsbury said, well, we got to try and find the right balance for our running backs. So if you're a fantasy player, you're thinking, well, maybe there's still a little hope. Biggest disappointment of the year.
Okay, so
I'm just going to say real quickly, here's my argument here, and I know that he won it, but I just want to quickly argue this because David Johnson at least gave you some usable weeks, and then towards the second half of the season, at least
Odell. So did Odell.
Odell had one top 10 finish the entire year.
Okay, but
Randall Cobb had 2 weeks in top 10. Anthony Miller had 2. Corey Davis had 2. He had 2 games with more than 90 receiving yards. He had just 4 games with 15 fantasy points or more.
Right, he has 4 fantasy. That's 4 15. That's usable. Usable.
David Johnson had some actually really awesome games earlier in the year. And the other thing is that once David Johnson came back and you sort of saw the writing on the wall, you knew towards the second half of the season you couldn't use him. So you at least benched him. You had to use Beckham the whole time.
You made the point. You're wrong, but you made the point.
Yeah.
I do disagree with you because the whole point is if you have to bench a guy that you drafted at the tail end of the first round, that's a huge disappointment.
That's why he was nominated 100%.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm not saying David Johnson wasn't a massive disappointment. He was. I'm just thinking. I
trying to keep
think
us-
Beckham was more so.
The music's playing.
Devon
You're off the
Dams.
stage.
Yeah. Moving along here, let's get to the waiver wire wonder of the year, the player who held the most fantasy value after not being drafted inside the top 160 players. The 5 nominees are as follows: Devontae Parker, we've talked about a lot so far this show; Darren Waller the Baller, one of Matthew's favorite preseason calls; DJ Chark, who Stephania grabbed in the second to last round of the War Room League draft; Josh Allen, who was drafted in just 20.7% of leagues, and Smokey Brown, his teammate, who drafted in just 34.3% of leagues. He finishes wide receiver 23 on a per-game basis. Matthew, you went against the
You know
great-
what? You know who I'm surprised is not a nominee on this list?
Who's that?
Jackson Agello.
I agree. Jackson was a nice
Waiver
midseason
wire
pickup.
find of the year.
That's right. Yeah. Matthew,
Jack, you want to explain who Jackson is? there,
Jackson,
Daniel?
Jackson is our PA that works on the show, and Jackson came in halfway through the year to be able to help not only publish the podcast, get it out a little bit earlier, but has handled almost all of our social media since he came in, which has been fantastic. If you've noticed that things look more succinct, it's because Kyle stopped writing elongated tweets.
War and Peace.
And and Jackson was able to just put it into like normal human speak.
Right.
It was
Normal
fantastic.
human speak. That's right.
That's your
Jackson
funniest thing
Agello.
you've said yet today.
No, exactly. So anyway, if you're watching the show, you get a shot there of random guy Jackson, who we just picked up off the street. So he's honestly been the waiver wire find of the year for me.
Exclusively
But
in deep leagues.
huh?
Exclusively a deep league find.
Exclusively a deep league find. Listen, we all are.
That's right. Yeah.
Let's be very clear here.
Matthew, you went against the grain of who actually ended up winning. You went with Darren Waller, the Baller. I'm sure this is just a personal pick because you liked him during the preseason.
Loved him in the preseason, but I looked at opportunity cost. Like, was DJ Shark, John Brown, and Devontae Parker great? They were all awesome.
Sure.
They were awesome. But they're also wide receivers where it was easier to find people, right? Same with Josh Allen. Josh Allen was awesome, but again, it's easier to find a quarterback, stream a quarterback week in, week out. But the tight end position was such a landmine this year, such a disaster. And to find a guy in free agency that finished as the 6th best tight end on a per game basis this year, to me, I think just the position that he played, the production was great for all these players, but I think Darren Waller, and yes, there is some personal bias there because he was my guy. I love Waller the Baller, but honestly, I do think it's a legit vote because of how hard it was to find a usable tight end this year. You know, listen, people are sifting through like, maybe this is the week that Kyle Rudolph scores a touchdown. Like, it's just, you know what I mean? Like, I just felt the tight end position was so hard. Remember, here's a guy that led the position with 5 different 100-yard games. He was first in percentage of team receiving yards, second in catches, second in receiving yards among tight ends. Waller the Baller, who was not drafted in over 80% of ESPN leagues, is my vote for waiver wire wonder. But once again, the voters got it wrong.
Pick for you, Matthew. You didn't get the right one, but nice pick. The 06010 for the best waiver wire find of the year goes to Stephania.
Devontae Parker.
How about that?
Yeah,
Devontae Parker. We've talked about a whole time already.
And you know what I think is the stat that jumps off the page the most for me? Weeks 11 to 17, he was wide receiver 2 in fantasy points, only behind Michael Thomas. Devontae Parker, I remember you talking about him, Field, when you were writing your waiver wire column, and I felt like you had to push him on people, and I think it's because people had seen him and didn't really believe. But if you picked him up, he ended up being one of the most productive people on your fantasy team.
He was incredible. He was start to finish good. He met the challenge of big moments, played great this past yesterday. Wow, feels like more than just one day ago. Devontae Parker, to me, was the clear-cut winner. Stephania has picked all 5 of the correct winners so far, as we are now halfway through our awards.
I want to say really quickly, the reason why I didn't vote for Darren Waller, and Matthew, I wonder if this is going to make sense, is the idea that not only did I hear you talk him up all preseason long, but he was a trendy sleeper at the tight end position. You were on it. Obviously, when we went to the combine, it was a thing that we had talked about with the offensive coordinator there. But the idea that there was at least a little bit of an expectation, and you were talking about Darren Waller, nobody was talking about Devontae Parker. And so that's sort of what piqued me towards the Parker edge a little bit more.
I think that's fair. I will say that, like, we talked to everyone else, like DJ Shark, we talked up preseason, especially when the reports were starting to come out. And, you know, John Brown and Josh Allen were both, you know, preseason sleepers for a lot of people, including us here. I think John Brown actually made the preseason love list in addition to Darren Waller. So, listen, it's hard to argue with Devontae Parker, who, you know, his story is nothing short of remarkable.
I love the holidays. You know who else loves the holidays? Burglars love the holidays.
That's right.
Yeah. They know you're going out to shop for last-minute gifts or after holidays gifts, or you're off to visit family or going on a long vacation. So you have to ask yourself, what does real protection mean for you? Well, with ADT, you can get all of the latest innovation in smart home security, combined with 24/7 monitoring from the most trusted name in home security. Customize your system to fit your homes. Everything from video doorbells, indoor and outdoor cameras, smart locks and lights, all controlled from the ADT app or the sound of your voice. So help protect your home this holiday season and get the nation's #1 smart home security provider. Get ADT. Visit ADT.com today. We're going on a very, very quick break, so go nowhere. We'll be back in just a minute.
Fantasy, you're in the 06010. Focus. Fantasy, focus.
We are back, and all eyes are on me right now because for those that don't know, we did a Secret Santa just before the holidays, and Daniel, unfortunately, was very sick that day that we had it, which left me out in the cold, a poor little giftless boy, because Daniel... I guess Daniel got me. You were assigned me for Secret Santa. Of course, it was done anonymously.
Accurate.
Which means that I am now left open up my gift right now, which I am doing.
Yeah, so there's a gift. I was very excited. I bought it within plenty of time. I bought it before a Secret Santa thing, but I got this for Field. Really excited about it.
Whoa.
Field, all right. What is it?
Wow.
Share.
It's a Rambler. Are you familiar with what Rambler is? Wow, this is really cool.
Okay.
So it keeps when you go out with your...
Well, hold on. How about we have Field read the card? We'll see exactly what it does.
Card that I got. This was someone slid this into our awards package. Dear Field, I love you. You're the best cast member on the show.
Read that. Start at the top. Don't start at the bottom.
Oh, okay, got
Sorry.
it. Just like every proper foot needs an accompanying boat shoe, so does every craft beer needs a koozie. I hope this Rambler keeps your treehouse as cold as Matthew's decision to put Jameis and Drew Brees on the Week 14 hate list. Love you, bud. Daniel. P.S. You are the best member of the cast. I made that last part up.
I want to see that note. I want to see this note.
No, the last part was made up. The last part was made up. Thank you, Daniel. This is so sweet of you. Do you understand? This is so fun.
And by the way, it was Jameis and Drew Brees on the Week 14.
Jameis and Drew Brees on the Week 14.
Both of whom went off in Week 14. Unbelievable. It's interesting. I
can't wait to drink out of this.
Yeah, I'm just curious. When you get like a sweet note like this, and it's unbelievable, so saying I love you and everything like that, and from Daniel, I just want to take a moment here to turn to Thirsty Kyle. Thirsty Kyle, and ask you how it feels to see something like this, because Daniel Dott posted a number of videos on social media, sponsored videos, in which he made you, somebody who doesn't actually drink alcohol, hold a beer and talk about how great his friendship was with you. And now here he is giving another beer to Field Yates, saying how much he loves him. Do you feel slighted in any way? Do you feel like you were used for the commercial aspects of At Something to Break on Instagram?
Not in the least. He's got a lot of love to share. We're good. And the Thirsty nickname, with the beer, I get it.
Well done. I agree. Let's move on to our next award, which is the Rookie of the Year.
This is the player. No fun. There's no fun. Come on.
Nope. It's been in the NFL for at least 10 seasons. No, just kidding.
I'm trying America.
Fantasy football's top producing rookie. The nominees are as follows: Josh Jacobs, Matthew's ride or die. You nailed that one. Miles Sanders of the Eagles, who was awesome and will continue to be awesome for them on Sunday when they play. He's expected to give it a go for Philly. Terry McLaurin, Matthew's wearing his jersey. Wonder who he'll be voting for. Kyler Murray, #1 pick in the draft, and A.J. Brown, who exploded onto the scene. Matthew, you were the only person. As a matter of fact, there were only 3 players that received votes. One of them got just 1 vote. It was Terry McLaurin. You were the guy that voted for him.
Higher weekly finish this season than Amari Cooper, Odell Beckham Jr., and Tyler Lockett. Had 6 different finishes as a top 20 wide receiver this season, despite the fact having to play with 3 different quarterbacks here on a Washington Redskins offense that was 32nd in passing yards, 30th in completions, tied for 28th in passing touchdowns, and yet still 58 catches, almost 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, averaged 13.7 fantasy points per game. It was a brutal, dismal, awful, horrific season for the Washington Redskins. But one bright spot was Terry McLaurin, who I think is an absolute find. And so Fantasy Rookie of the Year. Yeah, I felt like, because this is one where obviously my heart's a little bit in it. But the other piece of it here is that when you think about Josh Jacobs, you think about Miles Sanders, you think about Kyler Murray, they were all drafted at various, no, they were, but they were. I mean, Miles Sanders was a trendy sleeper in the preseason. Josh Jacobs.
I'm not debating any of that.
So my argument was, in terms of fantasy rookie of the year, I also baked into the fact opportunity cost, and McLaurin wasn't drafted in any league whatsoever. So he was a free agent that you could pick up off the waiver wire. A.J. Brown also in that mix as well. So he was the other guy that I was thinking of. But I thought McLaurin, because of the consistency that you got out of McLaurin and just because of the toughness, feels like A.J. Brown didn't really take off until Ryan Tannehill got under center.
I love McLaurin. He's going to be really promising. But from weeks 4 to 13, he had one game over 10 points. Just one. Josh Jacobs, far more consistent player, in my opinion.
He absolutely was.
But we have not yet disclosed the winner, which is why we head over to the 06-0-0 for the Rookie of the Year goes to Stephania.
Josh Jacobs.
Oh, there you go.
Field, since you and I voted for him, he is now our ride or die. Matthew no longer gets to call
him that. Good way of putting it, Stephania.
Only player with 3 games of 20 or more carries and multiple rushing touchdowns. And from my point of view, Josh Jacobs injured his shoulder badly in October, and yet he continued to play through it, played week in, week out until they forced him to sit out a game in week 15, and he was tearful because he really wanted to show his toughness and be able to play consistently. He came back for one more game, struggled to get through it, so much so that he had a hard time taking his equipment off in the postgame. A lot of heart and a lot of talent for this young man, and love to see it.
Yeah, he was awesome all year. Can't wait.
He was my fantasy ride or die. I have no issue with the.
It's gone.
You were all in it.
You ceded the title.
We get now.
I absolutely did not. No, fantasy ride or die means ride or die.
We were all hoping the die part would take place, but unfortunately we made it to week 17. Matthew was still with us.
I know.
Look, I just had a big birthday. Any minute now. And honestly, driving here, I could have skidded out. His brutal conditions to get here. I easily
become a tradition here with the awards show. The bad weather leading to
weird weather. Let's move along to our best value, the player whose production exceeded their projected value based on ADP. So this was players that had to be drafted in order to actually be nominated for this award. Lamar Jackson, get used to his name for a while. Austin Eckler was actually drafted more than you might think because Melvin Gordon's status hanging in the balance.
Of course.
Chris Godwin, a very popular sleeper in the preseason, not even a sleeper, but a breakout player in the preseason. And then DJ Moore. During the preseason, a lot of buzz about Curtis Samuel. This podcast was strong in the favor of DJ Moore going to be the guy for the Panthers.
Yep. I know everyone else was talking Curtis Samuel buzz, and we were very much like...
I'll cop to that. I was talking Curtis Samuel buzz a lot more, and I think, there were flashes, but not like DJ Moore.
But Field and I were very much against the grain, which we were like, we are still planting our flag on DJ Moore. Austin Eckler got one vote. It was from our colleague, Matt Bowen.
Sure. Yeah.
I'll just give you the case for Austin Eckler, what I assume that Matt Bowen was thinking. Austin Eckler, who went in the 10th round, right, and finished as the 4th best running back in fantasy. He was a top 5 running back 6 different times this season. He was a guy that just absolutely crushed for you. Obviously, running back so hard to find. And to get somebody as good as Eckler was at the start of the year, before Melvin Gordon came back, he was unbelievable. When you think about what he did after Melvin Gordon returned, from weeks 5 through 17. Again, Melvin Gordon is back, and yet Austin Eckler still he was still the 5th best running back in fantasy. And so that value in 10th round to find a top 5 running back in the 10th round, that had the week in week out consistency of Austin Eckler, it's pretty amazing.
I want to ask you this question: if you looked at everybody's point totals, Lamar Jackson, Austin Eckler, Chris Godwin, and DJ Moore right now, end of season, and said which of these at week 1 is the most unlikely for them to reach, I think Austin Eckler hitting 309 fantasy points. The rest of them were large. Like Lamar Jackson put up a ton of fantasy points. But is it possible if it all came together? Sure. So the idea that like Austin Eckler getting 300 fantasy points, I think is the least likely.
By the way, especially if you'd said, all right, here's all these guys, here's their point totals. Which one's most likely? By the way, Melvin Gordon comes back week 4.
Right.
Austin Eckler had the 2nd most fantasy points amongst running backs just through the air as a receiver since the NFL-AFL merger.
Wow.
2nd most ever. Trailing only Christian McCaffrey this year. Who
I remember the NFL-AFL merger. That was a good time. Yeah, it was a good party. We had a lot of fun. That was a big week.
Wasn't it?
Stephania,
awesome
we're going to head
party.
on over to you and be careful, Stephania. I'm just going to tell you to save some of your ammo because might be a popular player. But without further ado, the 06-0-0 for the best value goes to
Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, of course. No
brainer. Moving along. Any
Lamar
reason to belabor?
You already mentioned 415.7 fantasy points. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
6 touchdowns per 1 pick this season.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone saw that coming.
To me, all you have to say, because everyone knows, you don't need to recite stats about Lamar Jackson or anything like this. Everyone knows he's the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. He was the number 1 player in fantasy by a significant margin. But all you have to say is 13th round.
Yeah, 13th round. Yeah. Incredible value, league winner for 13th you.
13th round.
Let's get on to our breakout player of the year, the player whose production exceeded expectations. And this player had not previously emerged as a surefire, no doubt about it, fantasy asset for an entire season. Some familiar names: Lamar Jackson, Chris Godwin, who made the last category as well, Devontae Parker, Darren Waller, and also Austin Eckler. So all 5 familiar names here. We all voted for the same player. I'm going to hand it right back over to you, Stephania. Without further ado, the 060 and OE for the breakout player of the year goes to...
Come back up to the stage, Lamar Jackson.
Say, don't go too far. That's right, Lamar.
That's right.
Look, Godwin was amazing. Devontae Parker. To me, Devontae Parker is more breakout than comeback because he didn't come back from anything. Again, Austin Eckler, I think same thing. As a legit RB1. Darren Waller is a top 5 tight end, but
I felt like
again,
we saw
Lamar
glimpses
Jackson
of Chris Godwin last year, so there was a hint.
Yeah, he was a trendy sleeper for a lot of people,
but Lamar
including
Jackson,
myself.
really, there was a lot of doubt when it came to Lamar Jackson, and instead of him, succumbing to all the pressure, he soaked it up.
I mean, he blew expectations out of the water. I'll also say this about just real quickly, just want to clarify. Christian McCaffrey was the number 1 overall player in fantasy. Lamar Jackson was the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. I misspoke earlier.
So
sorry, I was a little bored. We've been talking about Lamar Jackson a lot.
Right. But so all of a sudden, you have some new swag.
Fashion forward, like I always am.
What are you wearing there?
I've procured a new shirt.
How'd you get that?
Stand up here. I found it in the studio.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh. I don't know.
Losing Parker. Is that a crappy band people haven't heard of?
Yes.
Wow.
You don't know how right you are.
As a matter of fact.
There's somebody who is a member of
Jackson,
that
you're not familiar with them, are you? You're not familiar? Jackson's probably not familiar.
Kyle, not familiar with Losing Parker? Kyle, you familiar with Losing Parker?
I've heard of him. Familiar with Losing Parker or no?
Tell us about this.
Who sent you that T-shirt?
Band.
I found it on eBay.
Yeah.
I got this as a Christmas gift.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually got 2 of them.
I bought it for him on eBay.
Losing. Wow. Wow.
Losing Parker. So there's a.
Back before I left for the Air Force, I was in a crappy band you've never heard of called Losing Parker.
What? Oh my God!
Are you serious?
Is this worth something?
Wait, can you sign this? Will you sign my kid?
Did my mother send you those T-shirts?
No, I got them on eBay.
I don't believe you.
This was
Where's mine?
eBay has suggested ideas.
You know what? There were only 2 left.
There were only 2 left? Did you guys only print 5?
We printed it.
Look, they're hard to come by. They're collector's
I'm
items.
sure they are.
You have no idea.
Do you have photos? Stop it.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe that my mother sent you photos.
Oh wait.
I'm so mortified right now.
I don't know if you guys can take a close up of that.
Oh my gosh.
Look,
Can you take
it's
a
our
close up
very
of that
own
picture?
secret squirrel.
Oh,
You guys look like a bunch of Harry Styles.
my mother is going to get an earful when I get home. I'll tell you that right now.
Oh, I can't because it's.
Oh my gosh, my little brother, my best friend David Williams, our drummer Mikey P.
This is amazing. Are you guys available on iTunes or no?
No, nothing is on iTunes.
Okay, gotcha. SoundCloud?
No, we don't have any music.
SoundCloud?
That we used to have a MySpace.
But I'd like to hear.
Oh my God! Does that still exist?
MySpace does still exist, but not in the same
Someone
way.
find the Losing Parker
Before we
MySpace
move on,
page.
It's so bad.
Every band has a story behind its name. Perhaps you care to share yours?
Wow.
Did you guys have a guy named Parker and you lost him? Be honest.
We made it.
You know what? I believe there's a story about that.
Yeah, please tell us, Daniel.
Come on, Daniel.
It was such a terrible story. We made up a story that we had a drummer who played with us and unfortunately passed away in a very serious plane accident, excuse me. And so we named the band Losing Parker because of it. That's not true. It was just like a little duck that we had that we would bring with us, and someone lost Parker. He would come to all the shows.
What is this, like Vince Vaughn from Wedding Crashers?
Yeah.
Lost a lot of good men playing for the Yankees.
We tried to make up like a cool, to be like
you
a legit emo band.
So you had a story, basically, that you told, so you would drag them in with the sympathy and hope they stayed for the
all
tune.
the sympathy, and then it was just like heartbreak over and over and over again.
Eric Hutchinson / Kitten Chip / Losing Parker.
I'm
EP
so disappointed. I cannot believe that you're wearing this right now. My mother is going to hear it from me.
I sleep in it already.
No,
I've already slept in it. It's been great.
Oh my gosh.
Let's move along here. here with our last
This is
couple of
amazing. Losing
awards.
Parker.
Yes,
Wait,
because,
are you
you
still
know-
in touch with the members of Losing
the
Parker? I have a
drummer-
lot of questions.
My little brother
is
played
no
bass.
longer with
Yep.
them.
And my best
Sounds like
friend
you're
who lives in
sure.
Boston, Dave, he played guitar. So like the three of us talk all the time. Mikey P, who was our drummer, I think he's a missionary in Africa now. He's like a solo pilot to do
Wow.
like twin engine, like taking supplies to and from Africa for needy places. So yeah. I haven't talked to Mikey P in a long time, but the rest of them, I talked to.
You know what?
What would
Mikey
it
P is
take?
Probably listening. Shout out
What
to him
would it
right now.
take? And this is just something for everyone to think about here. What would it take? And
For us to go on tour with Dance Gavin Dance,
Elizabeth
it wouldn't
Fearman, if
take a
you're
lot,
listening,
Matthew
what would
Berry.
it take to reunite Losing Parker?
It'd take a lot.
Losing.
I don't think my little brother remembers how to play any of the bass lines.
No one expects you to be good.
Yeah,
Here's the
I was gonna say,
positive.
Yeah.
We didn't say you guys had to play well. We just said we had to.
What would it take to reunite? Like if we got Kit and Chip, if we got
if Kit and Chip came to do a live show with us, because I know that's never going to happen for a fact, because I know that they'll never sing live. I know that's not going to happen.
Okay.
What about international recording superstar Eric Hutchinson?
If Hutch wants us to
What
open
about,
when he plays at Mohegan Sun, then we
what
will
about
consider it.
what about the members of
Darius
Dance Gavin
Rucker.
Dance?
I would go out on tour with Dance Gavin Dance. Would make that
Okay.
happen.
Whatever.
We're
Tillian,
gonna
you
make
hit me
this
up.
happen.
Yeah.
This is our goals for 2020. New Year's
Yeah,
resolution.
we got to figure this
New
out.
Year's
We
resolution.
got to get.
New Year's resolution
Listen.
for 2020. Losing Parker.
Listen.
We get the band back together, as
Look,
it were.
Devontae Parker made a comeback this year. Next year, it's Losing Parker.
Oh my God!
Come
Everything's
on.
coming up, Parker.
Synergy.
Yeah,
Move along
exactly.
to our last couple of awards.
I've decided the name of the band Losing Parker is because you guys drafted Devontae Parker like 5 years
And
ago.
we still-
and
yeah,
you dropped
yeah.
him. You
Too
dropped
early.
him
And you kept
eventually.
losing.
You kept losing.
Because of
Right.
him.
It was a
There you
dynasty
go.
league.
Yeah,
I
in a
let go of him
dynasty
too
league.
early,
Eventually,
yeah.
you dropped him.
All right, let's get to our playoff MVP, the player that had the most value during the postseason.
I'll tell you who the MVP is.
Weeks
Is Mama
14
Dopp.
through 7. That's right. Mama Dopp coming in.
It's with this Losing Parker. This is
Wrong.
unbelievable. You guys should see these photos.
This is weeks 14 through 17. So players like Lamar Jackson would be excluded because he sat in week 17. The nominees are Christian McCaffrey, obviously so good all year. Kenyon Drake had 100 fantasy points during those 4 weeks of the playoffs. Michael Thomas kept up his incredible season. Drew Brees was the top scoring quarterback. Saquon Barkley was the number 2 running back behind only Christian McCaffrey. And Tyler Higbee was the number 1 tight end. That's right. Tyler Higbee was the number 1 tight end. 4 players received a vote. Stephania and I saw it the same way. Matthew, you went off course and you went with Tyler Higbee as the playoff MVP?
Again, I'm just going with position scarcity, right? Because there were a lot of running backs that, look, Christian McCaffrey was awesome in the fantasy playoffs. He was awesome all year.
Okay.
Kenyon Drake was awesome prior, basically since he became the starter in Arizona, right? I mean, he was certainly great during the fantasy playoffs. Michael Thomas, Drew Brees, Saquon, they all produced throughout the year. But Tyler Higbee, to get 83 fantasy points out of a tight end you found on the waiver wire in the fantasy playoffs, to me, I guess the difference between Tyler Higbee and the other tight ends that people were starting to the fantasy playoffs versus the difference between some of the running backs and the other running backs, I guess for me, that's the difference that it was for me with Higbee. 7 or more catches in each of his final 5 games,
Yeah,
and at
pretty
least
impressive.
84 yards in each one of those games. Higbee was nothing short of a revelation when you needed it the most.
He sure was, and you kind of made the case for the guy that's going to eventually win the award. But just a note, Stefania's vote has been the player that has won the award for our first 8 awards. Can we keep it up, Stefania? Without further ado, the 06-0-0 for the playoff MVP goes to
Christian McCaffrey. No surprise here. How valuable was he to every fantasy team who drafted? I mean, the thing about Christian McCaffrey that's so amazing is that in addition to being awesome all season, and in addition to the Panthers not really having anything at stake, they kept putting Christian McCaffrey out there, and he kept racking up the points. Love that. All heart, really playing for his fantasy managers in the playoffs, even when he personally had nothing to gain. Love Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, I'm just going to note this, is that to underscore that point even further, Christian McCaffrey was on the highest percentage of leagues that, amongst the finalists. So he was the most likely player to be in a championship this year.
Right.
So not only did, in the playoffs in general as well. So he delivered for more people than Higbee did. I appreciate the case. I just think that McCaffrey was more commonly rostered on fantasy playoff teams.
The other thing is, and maybe this isn't fair to Christian McCaffrey, but one of the other reasons I voted for Tyler Higbee, I'm like, Christian McCaffrey's going to win some more awards. You know what I mean? Like,
you know what? Now that's not fair, and we can talk about that in another. But that's saying, I'm just going to take that award away from you because you shouldn't have multiple. If you earn in multiple categories, you should get.
No, I know, but he was MVP throughout the season. I didn't feel like he was anything special in the playoffs. He was basically what he was all season long, which was awesome and amazing.
But if you take those weeks in isolation, you are not supposed to factor into what he did. Then you're counting who delivered the most fantasy points during the playoffs. And as Field said, more points for a higher percentage of fantasy players. To me, that makes him the playoff MVP.
I've been on Chris McCaffrey since well before it was cool. Like I got
You've
all sorts
done
of
a lot of things since well before they were cool.
Christian McCaffrey came out of the woodworks, 8th overall pick.
Right.
You know,
No,
totally.
No. But in all seriousness,
coming?
go back and look
Not
at
me.
preseason last year, where I had McCaffrey as a first-round pick last year.
Yeah, you did.
And there were a lot of people that thought that was way too high, and the people thought, like, oh, he's going to get vultured by C.J. Anderson. That was a legit argument. They were like, he's not going to get the scoring opportunities. He's going to get vultured by C.J. Anderson. He's going to get injured because he can't hold up to a full season. Those were all the arguments that people had as Chris McCaffrey. Look at his ADP from not preseason this year, preseason 2 years ago, where he was basically going at the end of the second round.
Well, let's get to our final award because
saying.
it might involve Christian McCaffrey, the player of the year in fantasy football, the best player in fantasy football for 2019. We have 4 nominees. You could probably guess them on your own, but they are Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey. We just talked about those 2 players, Michael Thomas and Dalvin Cook. 4 guys that we have talked about all season long. McCaffrey scored the most fantasy points. Lamar Jackson had the second most amongst those 4 players, then Michael Thomas, and then Dalvin Cook. And how about this? With the 06-0-0, I'm going to actually go to Stephania right away because we had a unique circumstance here. The 06-0-0 goes to Stephania.
Christian McCaffrey.
And Lamar Jackson.
It was a tie vote.
That's right.
It was a tie.
We have co-winners here.
See that.
We have
It was a
co-winners,
tie.
equal opportunity
I read the card
vote
wrong.
here. Yes.
Now,
Strike
Field,
all
you
in.
voted for Lamar Jackson. You want to make the case for Lamar
Yes,
Jackson?
I did. You know what? I don't know why. It was just an emotional tug here. And maybe the case was this, because I'm sort of factoring in a lot of different things, right? Is that not just the performance, but also the value, right? So if you got Christian McCaffrey, you could have bungled your quarterback spot and maybe ended up, or, you
could have had both these guys.
Right. You could have had them both. So it just felt like value-based drafting taken into account. Lamar Jackson, we talked about it earlier, 13th round. Like, even if you didn't nail your first round pick, like maybe you took, I'm not saying David Johnson, but let's say you took, I don't know, a guy who was like Joe Mixon, back end of the first round. That's viable, right? And he was great down the stretch, but it took him a while to get there. Mike Evans, who got hurt. Players like that could have gone conceivably at the back end of the first round. You paired him with Lamar Jackson, you probably still won your fantasy championship. The case for McCaffrey's obvious.
But here, for Christian McCaffrey, again, the injury factor comes in. The running back, most vulnerable position. Yet here's a guy who played in all 17 games, didn't miss a snap, got banged up a couple times, had a sore back, was on the injury report. Yet he was out there and still consistently delivering fantasy points, even despite getting banged up and despite playing a position where everyone's job is to try to take you to the ground and hit you when you have the ball. The other thing, and I don't know what the stat is on this, but I'll be curious to look in the postseason. Do you remember going into this season, the Panthers were talking about reducing his offensive snaps?
Yeah.
And they were when I went to camp, you were hearing that his touches were going to remain relatively the same, but his percentage of time on the field would be less. I don't think that actually happened. And
if it did, it was a nominal amount. Like it's like things like he got banged up for a couple snaps here or there.
So none of that happened. And Christian McCaffrey, to me, those were part of the reasons why I leaned the way I did.
I'll say, and one of the other arguments I made was also, look, and Lamar Jackson was awesome. It was tough for me, but I voted McCaffrey, and I grant you the value of Lamar Jackson. But for me, what I put into is also a little bit sort of the same coin, but just a different side that Stephania is just sort of replacement value. Yeah. Right? Because if you missed out on Lamar Jackson, let's say you use an early round pick on Baker Mayfield, right? But like if you needed another quarterback, right? Josh Allen, Ryan Tannehill, it was easier to get, Jameis Winston.
Yeah,
I mean, Jameis. No, but like, I mean, look,
our savior.
Jameis Winston. I mean, but listen, Jameis finished. What did Jameis finish as? Like QB6 or something like that? I mean, like,
probably.
I mean, like. Yeah. So my point is that it was easier to find production at the quarterback position. But if you drafted, for example, David Johnson, you couldn't go out and find that production, especially this year where there weren't any. It was a bad waiver wire year, especially at the running back position. So Chris McCaffrey, who not only put up massive points, but every single week, at least 21 fantasy points in 14 of 16 games this year. It felt like a little bit more uneven for Lamar Jackson. By the way, Jameis Winston, Thirsty Kyle throws up on the screen, QB5 in total points.
Yeah. Wow.
I mean, it's unbelievable. So, I mean, Jameis Winston, who also went very late or undrafted in many leagues. And so, for me, that was why I voted for McCaffrey. And also, by the way, just if you're going to say Fantasy Player of the Year, he ended with more points.
Yeah. No.
I mean, and which is amazing when you think about that he actually had more fantasy points than a quarterback.
Yeah, it's just a matter of which way you want to examine it. But both players, very deserving of our most prestigious.
They will share the what I'm being told in my ear right now is that they will share the 06010. Our budget doesn't allow for two 06010s.
They'll cut it in half.
So we're in touch with Christian and Lamar. They will mail it back and forth to each other.
Odd and even months. Yes.
Yep. There you go. Every other week they will mail it to each other, so they can each share in the joy that is the 06010.
I want to say thank you to everybody that participated in this for our awards show. We had 12 different voters, not just the three of you, but also Mike Clay, Al Zeidenfeld, Eric, and Tristan, both who do a fantastic job with ESPN Fantasy.
Eric Carabell and Tristan Cockcroft. Give their last
Correct.
names.
Eric Carabell and Tristan H. Cockcroft as well. Matt Bowen, Keith, who cannot be here with us today.
Cool
Kyle,
Keith.
Yep. Kyle Soppy, the Statapillar, Damian Dabrowski, and then myself. We were the 12 voters. So
Jackson didn't get a vote?
Jackson did not get a vote.
Jackson Keller did not get a vote?
No, he did not.
Boy,
Wow.
that's just wrong.
How bitter are you, Jackson? You can say it. Go ahead.
That just comes with the territory of a late round flyer. You know, you get slept on for now. It's a future thing.
No, you deserve a vote. You deserve as much of a vote as the worst member of losing Jackson.
2020 is Jackson Agello's year. We also want to thank a lot of people that put a ton of hard work that goes into this podcast every single day. Kenny and Caroline and Isaac and our entire video team.
100%.
Many, many people. Those that actually take the video and produce it digitally, distribute it onto ESPN.com, the
Social
ESPN
media
app,
platforms.
social media, all of those involved. The entire crew behind the glass. Let me just tell you that these people work incredibly hard. Our engine is Kyle Soppy, man. Everybody... You got to the amount of work this guy puts into that show is incredible. Everybody does, but without him, I don't know where we are. He's the backbone of what we do. Daniel is our focal point. He is our heartbeat. Everybody that works on this podcast every single day pours a lot of love into it. Does an incredible job.
Did we 100%? I echo all those sentiments. Field. It takes a cast of thousands to make us seem semi-presentable. So we cannot thank them enough. Were we going to total up the board? Did we want to do that?
Right now, because Keith is not here, we have an unofficial board tallying, which I'm going to let Kyle take over.
Okay.
You guys were tied going into the season-long bets.
Yep.
Matthew made a strong push. Field had some Jarvis Landry exposure. We are currently tied 14-14 at this moment.
That's amazing. I think it's our second time we've tied in the past 4 years.
Which one of you is Christian McCaffrey? Which one of you is Lamar Jackson in this scenario?
That's an excellent question. I would say he's Lamar Jackson.
A little bit more dynamic.
He's certainly more spry at this stage of our careers. He's more spry, and he's the quarterback. He's the one who sort of, he's the host of the show. He distributes the ball.
I like that.
Yeah.
We thought you were going to get less reps.
You voted for Lamar. I think it's pretty obvious.
That's fair. That is fair enough. So anyway, 14-14. That's amazing.
That is amazing.
After all the year of all the board bets that we wind up tied. On Fantasy Football Now, we had the Red Zone, which after, something like 170 questions over the course of a year.
We were all
tied.
You and I were tied. I won by the tiebreaker, and you and I were tied. We beat Stephania by one question.
Unbelievable.
Over like 170 some odd questions over the course of a 17-week season.
Weeks.
You had three record-breaking weeks.
It was amazing.
And I still lost
we also want to thank Mike Clay, who did a great job stepping into the podcast.
Absolutely.
And the CSS DFS will continue to run during the playoffs every Thursday. Mike, Daniel, and Smizzle.
No. Yeah. Squirrel, Clay, and Smizzle. Sorry.
Squirrel, Clay, and Smizzle. Thank you guys for all your fun every single day and being a huge part of my life for the past 5 months.
The ship entire season.
I have to tell you, I wish everyone would have the opportunity to spend at least one day working with Field Yates, Stephania Bell, and Daniel Dopp, because you guys are incredibly patient, supportive, amazing teammates. It is a true pleasure to work with each of you every day. It's a real honor for me. You guys put up with a bunch of shenanigans. You have incredible patience. And I'm incredibly flattered and thrilled and cannot thank any of you enough. Thank you for letting me do what I do and, making the show what it is.
We need you to be you to make the podcast what it is. So we are honored to work alongside you.
We don't take it for granted.
I want to say a couple more thank yous if you don't mind. Would love to thank everyone that came out in New York, in Baltimore,
in Detroit,
in Detroit,
yep.
at Soho. At
Dolby Soho was awesome.
Soho for the Star Wars Rise of Skywalker event. That was a lot of fun. It's always great to see fans. We will be out live on the road again next year. Our thanks to everyone on the social media team here at ESPN. that helped distribute. We already talked about some of the video people as well, but our thanks to everyone at the ESPN YouTube channel, at Facebook for ESPN's ESPN Fantasy's Facebook page, our friends at Twitter. Thank you to everyone over at the ESPN app as well. And honestly, Field, I'd also, listen, thank you to our fans. We say it every time. The 06010 Nation is the greatest group of fans. It's so awesome when we go out in public and meet you guys. And Field, you and I have had this conversation privately. Stephania, I know you and I have as well, as long as Daniel, is like when I go out and people recognize me in public, the first thing that comes up is the podcast. Sometimes 100%. They'll mention the column, or they'll mention, Stern, or they'll mention the fantasy show or Fantasy Football Now or something like that. They'll mention, Avengers, a league. But by far the majority is the podcast, is the 06010. And we've been doing this a long, long time. And the only reason we get to do it is because people like yourselves tune in every single day, that you at least download, whether you listen or not.
It's weird for me because usually it goes, they ask me about losing Parker first, and then they ask me about the
right, of course, obviously.
Yeah.
By the way, it's the podcast.
Yeah, that's fair.
This is not goodbye. This is not goodbye for a while. This is so long for now.
This is putting a wrap on 2020.
2019.
2019.
Yeah. Look at you trying to get out of 2020 already.
I was like, oh, man. I almost slid that under the...
If you do subscribe to the podcast, keep that subscription. Don't unsubscribe. We won't be spamming your podcast folder. We will just be adding some notes in there occasionally beyond the CSS DFS podcast, which will come out every Thursday throughout the playoffs. And then I might be biting off more than I can chew. Maybe some executives will tell me that I'm wrong here, but we're going to have some fun and mix it up this offseason with a couple of ideas that might be not just fantasy. We'll have some fun and figure something out, and maybe just some talking shop, talking about life.
We will have a lot of fun with that. Oh, and last thing I should thank everyone that played in the men's and women's leagues. I want to thank the Celebrity League. First, thank you very much to Darius Rucker, to Rachel Lindsay, to Lord and Miller, to Anthony Mackey, to Topher Grace and Sim Sarna, Field to you and Stefania, to John Legend, to Zach Efron, to Kyle Busch, to Jim Parsons, to Evan Longoria, and to our 2019 champion, Miles Teller, whose Eagles just made the playoffs.
I know.
Good couple of weeks.
And he had a great fantasy year.
Sure did. Great year, great life for Miles Teller. Congratulations to him.
And by the way, Top Gun looks awesome.
Yeah.
That's his next film. So that looks so. Anyway, thank you to all of our celebs for playing. Do you want to give a shout out to who won our? Do we know who won our men's and women's leagues?
Don't know.
I know that Stefania and I did not do well in our
Is this
league.
a sore subject for you guys?
Well, in the show league, we just didn't do very well, Matthew Berry. I don't know what you want me to say about it, but I will say this. And the end of the year, You Can't Defeat Us, which was Tracy Long, came in first, beating Josh Felder, the crappiest band you've never heard of from the Juliana Theory, 320 to 290. So congratulations to Tracy. Man, we did not. Stefania and I played very poorly this year. I would like to say that.
Oh, wow.
Well, you drafted the first 7 rounds.
Nowhere to go but up, Daniel. You guys were the first round of 2019.
Oh, wow.
No.
Ending 2019 with a shot across the bow.
I'm sorry. I take that back. I love you. I love all the fans. We will talk to you guys sometime soon. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you guys later.
Peace out.
You're in the 06010. Never gonna hustle, in case you didn't know. Matthew Berry, TMR.
You guys go ahead, give me grief for being on SportsCenter for 45 seconds. I think you could do better than me, because I don't think you could.
Jailbait, Field Yates.